Now, in answering the question, Electricians, is your future in controls, automation, and BEMS or BMS? My answer is yes. Yes, your future is in controls, automation, and BMS, and I'm going to go into a lot of depth as to why this is the case. I'm going to show you what all the opportunities look like and how they compare to regular electrical work. I'm going to talk about money for new employees, self-employed contractors, and business owners. I'm actually going to show you real world invoices to prove what I'm saying is true. I'm going to explain what types of electricians are best suited to upskilling into this industry. And I think you're going to be surprised at my answer, because I'm not just going to say industrial electricians. And I'm going to share with you realistic timeframes of how long it takes to move into the industry and then to become self-employed contractors or business owners. And I'm going to be showing you real world examples of people that I know who have done this, again, to prove that it is possible for electricians just like you. And that's, of course, if you, i.e. the person watching this video, is in fact an electrician and not a filthy, dirty, smelly, wished he'd become an electrician plumber. Sorry, plumbers, you're all right, really. Okay, so first of all, why is your future in controls, automation, BEMS, BMS, BAS, basically building control, building automation, building management systems? So the first thing, let's talk about the industry as a whole. It's probably pretty obvious to most people. They probably heard it somewhere, but the whole push around net zero, reducing our carbon footprint, getting to, net zero by 2050. That's one thing. There's a lot of government incentive, government sanctions around all of that to basically get businesses, get organisations to that point. So the UK, at least the UK, but this is obviously global, can reach that place by 2050. Now, the other thing in terms of the industry is energy prices. So for the last 2-3 years, energy prices have got very, very expensive. What with things going on in Ukraine and just things like that, global economy, people are wanting to reduce their energy spend because it's just getting so expensive. So again, and it kind of ties into net zero, it's businesses wanting, and more organisations and individuals even, we can talk about the domestic market as well. Just everyone wants to reduce their spend of energy, so this is where management systems, energy management systems and controls can help reduce that. And then the final thing, just in terms of the industry as a whole, is, I don't know how many of you hear this on a regular basis, but I've heard this every place that I've worked, that there's just no good engineers. So this industry, controls, automation, BMS, is lacking good engineers. There's a huge shortage of engineers, not just engineers like employee engineers, but also service providers, businesses that can provide these types of services in controls, automation, and building energy management systems. So there's a huge demand, there is a huge demand, and there's not enough supply to meet the demand. And there's loads of other nice things that comes into that if you are a service provider, if you are an employee in this space, because economics 101, if there's huge demand and not enough supply, then you can obviously charge more for your services, your labour, your expertise. So that's another thing. Now, just going back to the original point, why you as an electrician is your future in controls, automation, BMS. And to me, and hopefully to other people, this makes sense, but you are the most logical and best suited profession to meet this demand, which I was just talking about. And let me explain why that is. And the first thing is that you're basically already in the industry. You're already in the electrical industry. You as a profession, you as a service provider, you already have all the relevant tooling, all the relevant equipment. You're familiar with so much of the hardware, a lot of the hardware I'm sure you see in here, you're already familiar with, and you already have relationships with wholesalers, manufacturers, so it's not really that different just to take on more of the project pie, really, in taking on controls and automation and BMS. And tying into that, the fact that you are already basically in the industry is most likely you're working on sites that has controls and automation in them. It's just perhaps at you're not providing that part. So what I was saying is, like, you could take on more of the project, get a larger piece of the project pie if you were able to take on that part of the project. So not just like the electrical installation, but also the control side of it. Because if you think about it, any commercial site pretty much has a good level of controls. Like, certainly if they've got a plant room, so like schools, for example, great example, they all have plant rooms, they all have BMS systems similar to this. Leisure centres, swimming pools, they all have controls like this. Apartment blocks of flats, shopping centres, like basically any commercial building, except for maybe small office units where it'd be more like a domestic or residential small home. Pretty much all commercial premises have controls, at the very least HVAC controls, but it might be more than that. It might be lighting, might be security, might be access. So there's a high likelihood that you're already working around this stuff. It's just you're not taking on this part of the job, this part of the project. And if you're working in high-end residential, this is becoming the norm. Smart homes, home automation has already been the norm in this part of the market for a long time. But more and more, because of this whole net zero and energy savings, they're bringing in proper, full-on BMS systems now into these properties. And then the final thing tying into you guys being the logical and best suited profession is that you already have a fundamental understanding in electrical. Like, you understand cable infrastructure, wiring regulations, the dangers, the regulations, BS 7671. Although, just to let you know, control panel standard is actually different. It's not BS 7671, but it's all very similar stuff. But in terms of outside of the control panel, all of that infrastructure, you already know how to do safely. And in terms of like the practical hands-on, you know how to terminate cables. You know what all the connections are for. And you've been doing electrical power and electrical lighting for years and years. So just upskilling to controls isn't that much of a jump comparing you guys to another profession. Okay, and then the final point that I want to make on my initial point, why your future is in controls, automation, and BMS, is, just look at technology. Technology continues to advance. Like, whether we like it or not, technology will continue to advance. It will continue to become more convenient for people. It will continue to make lives easier, make people more comfortable, save people money. It's just inevitable. Just look at cars, for example. Like, every car now is manufactured with electric windows, reversing sensors, reversing cameras, heated seats, perhaps, all of these things. We're never going to go back to cars where you have to manually wind down the window. And it's exactly the same thing with buildings, whether they're commercial buildings or residential buildings or industrial environments. So those buildings themselves, but also industrial process and control happening within industrial premises for businesses like manufacturing, logistics, warehousing, pharmaceuticals, all of that thing. And as technology advances, the cost comes down. So the actual hardware, think about mobile phones, how expensive they were when they first came out, to how the cost of getting a smartphone now, just in the space of 10 years, how much more accessible it is for people to get smartphones. It's exactly the same with this type of technology as well. So the demand will continue to go up and the price will continue to go down, which will ultimately drive that demand even further. Okay, so the second point that I want to talk about, what type of electricians are best suited to upskilling? And it's not industrial electricians, it's not commercial sparks, it's anyone who is decent, anyone that actually is interested in learning, anyone that actually wants to develop themselves personally but also professionally. People that have got drive, people that have got ambition, people that are perhaps sick of just doing standard electrical twin and earth, and want a little bit more. And also, and I see this a lot and it's a real shame, the people that have genuinely had enough of the electrical industry and just how it continues to go downhill, So the people that have perhaps been in the industry for a very long time, when standards used to be good and you couldn't get into the industry just after a a 16-week course. Because what's happening is, with this being the case, as I'm sure you will well know, it's just driving the standard, workmanship standard down. So what happens is customers, or just people in general, getting a worse impression of electricians, of people within the industry, because there's so many people who aren't trained sufficiently, who don't really know what they're doing, driving this standard down. And because they haven't put in as much graft and effort into getting to where they are, they don't put as much value on themselves. So they're charging themselves out for less, which is driving the price of what you can actually charge for your services down. So it's ultimately becoming a race to the bottom. So much more competitive, certainly in just standard domestic. We're also hearing all too frequently about electrical firms, electricians having their vans broken into and then having their tools stolen. And this is the beauty of being a controls and automation engineer. Literally, all I have is, I'll show you, is my Vito pack with just hand tools and either a tablet or a laptop bag when I go to site. So I don't even need a van. I've got a van which I've never really used because I don't carry tools or equipment. I'm mostly doing commissioning when I am on site. I'm not really doing install work. This is really for electricians that have been standard electricians for too long and they've had enough of the state of the industry and they want to specialize. That's another thing. This is a specialist profession, but it's a very broad skill set. Once you understand the skill set that comes under controls, automation, BMS, which is ultimately electrical controls, once you understand that, that just opens up, which we'll get to, so many opportunities across so many sectors. And also people, I've spoke to a lot of electricians, and I think because the standard of the industry is getting driven into the ground, that they perhaps feel that just general members of the public, even family members, friends, don't necessarily respect them quite as much as they used to. Electricians was once the top of all the trades. And I think perhaps now that that's becoming less of the case, just purely down to the way the industry's going. So I think a lot of guys, certainly the guys that I've spoken to, are getting sick of that as well. The next thing I want to touch on around this is potential fears and hesitations that regular electricians or regular electrical contractors have when facing this industry or this sector like controls, automation, BMS. And I think the first one is that they feel that this sector, this skill set is really only for qualified individuals that have been to university and got like bachelors in electrical engineering or something like that. And I can tell you categorically that just isn't the truth. These are just self-limiting beliefs, which I had as well before I got into the industry, but that's just categorically not the case. I'm proof that that's not the case. All I've done is an apprenticeship when I was like 16, hated it, didn't pay attention, so that didn't really prove much. And I know countless other electricians, like if you, just something that's very easy to do, if you pull up the Loxon, so you might not be aware of it, but Loxon.com and the partner map, you can see lots of different partners who use Loxon, which is basically a controls and automation and BMS system. Their partner map is full of electricians who were once just regular electricians who are now doing, controls and automation. And a lot of those people I know personally. And I've also worked with a lot of people, like actually more of the people in this industry aren't from that background. They aren't from that academic background, because what's more important in this industry is that you understand practical things, the realities of installation, building things like this, making sure that they test out okay, and programming and making sure that they work, and then supporting systems after the fact. So the academic stuff doesn't really come into it. Like you can learn all of that stuff without university. And again, just from speaking to people, speaking to students, speaking to people that have been through university, it's all theoretical crap, nonsense that doesn't apply to the real world. So like you as a standard electrician, you've got far more experience and understanding and better suited than someone who's been to university, because they aren't taught real world stuff, practical things that apply in the real world. It's all theoretical rubbish, and usually taught by people, no disrespect, but taught by people that haven't actually been and done it. They haven't been in the trenches. They just don't know, So the other thing I wanted to touch on, like fears, hesitations, is I hear this a lot, and that is, well, how can I progress into this industry if I've got no previous experience in this industry? Well, as I've already alluded to, you kind of already have a hell of a lot of experience in this industry. There's so much overlap between just standard electrical and controls automation BMS. So firstly, I would argue that you do have experience, but in terms of like controls experience, then yeah, perhaps you don't have experience. And I think this is where the problem is caused by recruiters, business owners asking for experience on job descriptions, 5 years experience, and they talk about it in years. And this is a big problem, and it scares a lot of people off because that's meaningless. Like if you've spent 5 years, you got 5 years experience in the industry, that proves fuck all. It means absolutely nothing. As you know as well as I do, as well as these business owners and these recruiters, they know that's meaningless because someone could spend 5 years in the industry, do the absolute bare minimum, have no interest whatsoever, and just doing enough not to get fired. Or you could have someone that's been in the industry 5 months, like has done a hell of a lot of learning and stuff off their own back before they even got into the industry, and continues to do that within that 5 months, and they're just good people, they're just so much better, people that are actually going to go places. You can tell this just from having a conversation with them and understand their level of knowledge, understanding, enthusiasm, ambition. It's annoying that people think that experience comes down to time served, because it's not. Now, I'm a business owner now, so what I'm looking for in people is I don't really care if they've spent 5 years compared to 5 months, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to know how good they are until I actually take them on. You're never going to know. But you can get a good feel for someone from just having a conversation. Someone, certainly in a technical industry, you can check people's understanding, level of expertise and knowledge just from having conversations. And that's really all that matters. Like, what do you know? And then are you going to deliver for me as a business owner within this role if we take you on? And you're never going to know that second part until you actually take them on, whether they've been in the industry 5 months, 5 years, 50 years. But you can tell if someone knows what they're talking about before you get to that point, and that's the important bit. And I'm going to share with you some people later on who have done this. I've done this as well. When I went from working at Loxon as a partner coach to then an electrical controls engineer at R&B Industrial, I was not an electrical controls engineer. And I'm not going to get into all of this, but basically through my persistence, my willingness to learn, like the effort that I put in, and that I had some level of understanding in the industry, knowledge that I'd acquired, and I could talk on their level to a certain degree, I was able to secure a position with them. And then I was able to maintain that position once I got my foot through the door, because I delivered, and I went above and beyond and all of that stuff. Not to toot my own horn, but I was really genuinely interested in learning and doing well. And then the final thing in terms of like common hesitations, fears, worries is, I think, because I felt the same, is we feel people that aren't academics, that wasn't for them at school, they feel like, well, I only really learn through doing stuff with my hands. I can't like sit down, learn out of a book and all of that kind of stuff, stuff that we wanted to get out of school as quickly as we possibly could, back in the day, because that's what we were forced to do. So they feel like they only learn now through like actually physically hands-on experience, which actually isn't the case if you look at things statistically. Statistically, I think it's something like 80% of the population, worldwide population, most people learn through visual learning, and kinesthetic learning, where you're actually doing it, is a far smaller percentage. And obviously there's a blend and a mix of people's different learning styles. It might be partly visual, auditory, kinesthetic, different percentages for each. But generally speaking, the people that actually cannot learn any other way, purely kinesthetic learners, is a very small percent. I can't remember the exact percentage, like 5 or 10% of the worldwide population. Most people learn visually. And I think that's how people that go into the trades, they learn. They do learn through seeing things and being there, but also videos, also sort of images as well. So that shouldn't be something that stops you, providing that the place that you're getting your information and training and coaching and whatnot is done right, and it's not death by PowerPoint, and it's not read a load of crap out of this book or this manual. Right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to explore all of the amazing opportunities for employees and contractors and business owners. So I'm going to do this on my computer so I can share with you some things that I've been exploring, and it will make it a bit more, interesting. So let's get into it. Okay, so what do the opportunities look like in the controls, automation, BEMS, BEMS, BMS, BAS, building energy management systems, basically? What do they look like for electricians, and how does that compare to regular electrical work? So the first thing I want to show you is this. So what this is, and I've actually got a full video going into this into much more detail, should be here or there. To stop you clicking on that now, I'll add it at the end of this video so you can go straight into this in more detail if you're interested after this video. But yeah, what I've created here is a controls and automation industry overview. Basically, it's split. This whole industry is split into habitable environments and uninhabitable environments. And then what happens is, on the habitable environments, it kind of gets split between like audio visual, AV, and then automation, and then BMS, building energy management systems, automation. So we're really only focusing on the BMS side, but also on the uninhabitable environments. This is like all the industrial sectors, which it's just endless. It is just ridiculous, completely ridiculous. Just how much opportunity, how many sectors tie into like uninhabitable environments. You know, manufacturing, chemical, oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, food and beverages, mining, agricultural. Like, it's just crazy, as you can see from all of those right there. I didn't mention, in terms of the habitable environments, what we're talking about here is, you know, like commercial buildings, yachts, boats, ships, and houses, homes. That's what I mean by that. Those are like a big picture of what I'm talking about in terms of opportunities. Like, there is BMS systems in pretty much every commercial building, every building that like has HVAC or has a plant room to control. And then more and more frequently, you're seeing lighting control, shading control, energy management's obviously a massive one at the moment, security, access. You know, it's all coming under the sector of building management. You know, more people want this sort of stuff. And that's where you can find it, is these, you know, these places: buildings, properties, homes, ships, boats, etc. And then obviously with the uninhabitable environments, all of this opportunity happens in all of these sectors and more. So yeah, that's a quick overview of the industries, the sectors, the opportunities. Right, so now what I want to do is I want to jump into like the breakdown of a real world project. So if you're looking to go self-employed in this industry, be a business owner in this industry, I want to show you just one simple example of how it all breaks down, what it looks like in terms of work-life balance, financials, revenues, profit, like general overview of what my original business plan was and what that looks like. So I'm going to go through that with you now. So my original business plan, and things have obviously changed a little bit now. What I focus on now is training, coaching, mentorship, that kind of thing. But originally, this is how it broke down. So one business, B Automation, smart, and I wanted to focus purely on smart home automation. So not BMS, not industrial, and the three systems that I knew were Zenio KNX, Control 4, and Loxon. So those were going to be the systems that I used. 3 systems is overkill. You shouldn't be learning 3 systems off the bat. Like, I could have done all of this with one system, but I already knew the 3 systems when I started my business, so I had some flexibility there, but you could choose one. I wanted to just be a solo business owner. I didn't want a team of anyone. I just wanted to be self-sufficient, no responsibility, and I didn't want to do any installation work. I just wanted to move away from install work completely. I, in an ideal world, didn't want to be working more than 8 hours per day, 5 days a week. Now, obviously, there's some exceptions that you have to, work longer hours and maybe put in a few extra days a month every now and then. But generally speaking, that was what I wanted to work for. That's why I started my business. I wanted to earn above an average salary, because what's the point of going into business if you're not going to earn more than the average salary? If I could be doing the same work for someone, then I might as well do it for someone and earn that same salary. So above average salary, and I want at least a 20% profit margin. Again, I just feel unless you're going into business, and obviously it depends the industry, the size of the business and all the rest of it. But starting out in a service business like this, at least a 20% profit margin. So that's what I was aiming for. And ultimately I wanted to be free to choose what work I did, what projects I worked on, without anyone telling me what to do. I realised too later on in life that I'm not good with authority. So yeah, that's basically what my plan was, what I was aiming for to start with. And I think it's ridiculous, my opinion. People setting out with a 5-year business plan, that's ridiculous, because within a couple of months, things have changed. Within 6 months, things have changed. Like, by all means have a goal, but I just think it's a waste of time putting together a 5-year business plan. Like, this is a good business plan to work to, in my opinion. So yeah, that's like the starting point. Now let me give you this real world project that I did with my business fairly recently, because I wanted to get a good understanding that I was pricing my time correctly and I was pricing projects correctly. And I do this on a lot of projects, but I broke down the time, like how much time I invested into each individual section, days on site, etc. So this was for a 49k medium-sized smart home automation project, and basically it came out to total hours working time in terms of 8-hour days, 23.5 days. So let's say that it took 24 days to deliver this sized project. So let's just break things down now. Yeah, 24 days to deliver this project, 360 days per year. And if we remove weekends, bank holidays, that works out to be 250 working days that are available in a year. Now, we're not machines. We want to enjoy some time off with our family, go on holiday with the kids, etc. So let's remove 4 weeks away from that, which leaves us 230 days that we actually want to work. Okay, so that's what I'm working with, and you'll see how this breaks down across the year in terms of financials and whatnot. We're working out now how many projects we can take on in that per year, basically. Because a project takes us 24 days to deliver, of this size at least, and we've got 230 days that we're going to be working within that year. So divide those 230 days that we're working by how long it takes to deliver a project, 24 days, that equals 9.5 projects per year. Well, let's just say that that's 9 projects per year, and then we've got an additional 14 days spare for a bit of me time. Bit of me time to unwind, to not get stressed out, to enjoy as we like. So that's what we're working to, people. 9 projects per year and 216 working days per year. So this project specifically, let's break down the labor. So when I break down the labor and the pricing around labor, or costings around labor, what am I actually pricing for? Just so you guys know: consultation and specification, design and documentation, panel building, wiring and testing, programming, on-site commissioning and handover. And all of that, notice there's no installation work. I'm not doing installation work, which was part of my original plan. I'm not doing installation work. So out of that 49k project, 13k of that is labor. By what I mean by labor is those things that I've just mentioned. This does, however, just to be fully transparent, does include fuel, food, drink, and hotel expenses. So this project was about 2-3 hours away from my home. So the times that I did have to attend site, there were additional expenses, food, drink, hotels, fuel, etc. included into that 13k. So what that ultimately breaks down to is 13k divided by 24 days equals £541 per day, which was pretty accurate in terms of my original pricing. I want to be earning around, no less than 500 quid a day. That's how the sort of labor breaks down. Now let's have a look at the hardware and how that breaks down. Again, the same project, 49k, medium-sized smart home automation project. The hardware was 36k. And in terms of the hardware, what I'm talking about here is peripherals in the home. So like switches, smart light fittings, motion sensors, valve actuators, and then like all the control hardware within the panel. Now this is part of the beauty of being in this industry. With control and automation hardware, depending on the manufacturer that you buy it from, you're getting 20 to 50% trade discounts. Okay, so let's average that out. So 35% trade discount average on that 36k hardware. If you're able to sell a project, and again, this is just a medium smart home project of this size, just off the back of selling this project, I've made 12.5k basically straight profit, just off the back straight away. So that's one important thing to remember about this industry. Now, are you ready? Because when I then calculated all of this and looked into the numbers, looked at the revenue, I was pretty blown away. So this is strap yourselves in, make sure you're sat down, get ready. So let's just think about it from a work-life balance perspective, going by what I intended my original plan was. You're a one-man band business owner, okay? So self-employed contractor or small limited business with just you. You work 216 days per year doing automation projects and projects that you choose. Now, obviously, when you start out, there's going to be a bit of a overlap where you're doing this, maybe you're doing just general electrical work for the first year with, little automation projects, bits here, bits there. Like it does, let's be real, you don't just jump straight into doing this. It happens over a period of time, depending on how good you are at marketing, selling, and all of these things, the people that networking, etc. But ultimately, you get to a point where you're spending 216 days per year doing automation projects and projects that you choose to do, like your choice. You're free to choose which ones you do. And generally speaking, you don't work over 8 hours per day unless you're on site. So the times that I was on site with this project, I was doing like 10 to 12 hour days, but I was only on site for 3 days, 2 days, that kind of thing, spread out across, I think it's across about a year. So really, it's not often you're on site, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get the work done. Yeah, and for this project specifically, 65% of the project was done from home. So in my office here or in my garage workshop when I was building like the panel. And then 35% of the project was on site doing commissioning, programming and client handover. Again, no installation work. I contract, in this case I didn't, the client already had an electrician, but I would either work with the client's electrician or contract an electrical firm in to do the install, and I just support them. So yeah, only on site doing commissioning, programming and handover. I didn't work, or generally speaking, for this project at least, I didn't work any weekends or bank holidays. And in the grand scheme of things, across the year doing these types of projects, I'm able to take 4 weeks off per year for holiday with the family, and I still have 14 days left over per year spare to use how I like. Bit of me time to unwind, relax. I'm not doing, some of the people that I speak to doing like crazy 70-hour weeks just to make ends meet. Like, no, that's not why you go into business, not for me anyway. So yeah, that's kind of like the work life around doing these types of projects. Now let's have a look at the final business figures. So annual revenue of 441k, okay? And I'll come back to these numbers in a second just so you can see the maths. A yearly salary of £116,800, and just, transparently, that does include fuel, food, drink and hotel expenses. Straight profit from the hardware that we talked about earlier, that 35% margin, 113,500 straight profit from hardware, just from selling projects, from doing nothing else other than selling projects, which total overall is a profit margin of just over 25%. This straight profit margin from this annual revenue, that's all we're looking at here. Obviously, we could take more profit if we weren't paying ourselves this much. We probably don't want to pay ourselves this much because of tax reasons. But yeah, hopefully you see what I'm getting at here. So a total income into our business, into us, if we add the straight profit and the yearly salary, salary is 230k basically. Okay, pretty decent. So let's just break down that final maths if it's not clear. 9 projects per year, working 216 days per year. Okay, 216 days per year at that £541 day rate that we worked out early on. So that's what gives us that salary, 116,000 basically. Now, if we're doing those 9 projects at 49k for medium-sized smart home automation projects per year, that's what gives us our 441k annual revenue. And then 9 projects around that trade discount amount of 35% on this project specifically, about 12.5k. That's where we get our straight profit of 113k. And then if we divide that 113k by our overall revenue, okay, and then times that by 100, that's what gives us our profit margin. Please feel free to check my maths. I'm pretty sure, I'm 99% sure this is right, but please feel free to double check it. Now, that's probably of interest to you if you're thinking about going self-employed contractor or business owner within the industry. Now, if you're more employee focused, you're happy just being an employee, or even if you are a contractor or business owner, I want to just get into the technical progression, what that looks like, just so you know how that progression path looks like, and then what it looks like if you wanted to stay as an employee, progress into the industry with different positions that would be relevant at different times. So I want to get into that now. The technical, it would look something like this. The first thing that you need to master is electrical controls. That's like the fundamentals that underpins all of those sectors of controls and automation and BMS that we looked at earlier on. The fundamental skill set that all of those opportunities in all of those sectors, it all comes back to electrical controls. Okay, so that would be the first thing that we focus on. So build that skill set up. Then once you've understood that, you can then get into understanding how does it all work? How do you build it? How do you put it together? How do components wire up, and how do you construct a system start to finish? Okay, so that's the second thing, you know, the how to the what. And then finally, after that, we now can understand, we've now got a really good foundation and a picture of the system. We can now get into, well, why is it being specified, designed, documented that way, and how do we go about doing that? Then we get into the design phase. So you can see, like, we got the fundamentals in electrical controls, and then we get into delivering projects. And what this will do, this level of understanding will give you the skill set of 6 different people or departments. Because if you break all of this down and think about it in terms of specific roles and positions, this will give you the skill set of a sales engineer because you're able to specify jobs. You're able to become a design engineer because you know how to specify, document and design systems. You'll be able to build control panels. You'll be able to install systems. You'll be able to test and commission them, and you'll be able to support them after the fact. So yeah, incredibly valuable and incredibly in-demand skill set for you as an employee or as a business owner contractor. And ultimately, if you are a business owner contractor, self-employed, just you need to understand all of these things anyway, so you can successfully deliver projects by yourself. Now, in terms of employee progression from an electrician into the industry, like taking that first step. So yeah, the first step that an electrician would make once they've got the right technical skill set and understanding, and the more of those things the better, because they're going to be more valuable and going to increase their chances of being taken on and hired. The first thing, really, the easiest position to get into is going to be that of a service engineer. Okay, so let's have a quick look at a BMS service engineer, for example. So BMS service engineer jobs, and let's have a look at some of these. You know, 45k to 32.5k, 52k. So I just want to go through financials really more than anything else. 40 to 50k. So this is pretty standard for a BMS service engineer. Anything from sort of 40 to 55k, depending on experience, you know, what you have to offer. 32k here to 55k. So yeah, that gives you an understanding of like the financials around the first step, an electrician. The logical step from being an electrician to getting into the industry would be something like a BMS service engineer, BMS commissioning engineer. And then just coming back here, this is kind of how the progression would go. Like, you would start as a BMS service engineer, then you'd probably help out with installation as well, if necessary. Then you'd progress to like a testing commissioning engineer. Then if you want to progress in a logical way and cover everything and not skip things, the next phase would be you'd be a design engineer, and then you might get into project engineering. You know, you might progress to like doing into a sales role where you're specifying jobs. Okay, so now what I want to do is just share with you some real world invoices of jobs, day rates that I've been on, just to show you the sort of day rates that I'm charging. For me, I don't want to charge anything less than 500 quid a day. So this project, for example, KNX site visit, 550, and this is all ex-VAT that you're seeing up here. I'm VAT registered, so I have to charge VAT. But imagine if you're not, you know, you can ultimately charge an extra 20% on that. So yeah, you know, 660. So that's one example. Another example. So one day on site fixing a locks on system. So here, this guy was literally round the corner from me, like a 5-minute drive. So I was like, oh yeah, 500 quid. I'm happy with that. Obviously plus the VAT as well. You know, some of these people, they're not businesses, so you know they're not going to be able to claim back the VAT, or they might not be VAT registered businesses. So yeah, 600 quid there. So this was a client in London, and there's other expenses that come into doing stuff in London, but you can just generally charge higher day rate anyway. So this one was 650 per day, and that's not including the VAT. And then they needed some additional hardware. So yeah, some additional hardware there. Made a little bit of margin in on these. Actually, I don't think I did actually. No, I didn't, because they were such a lovely client and it was such a small little amount. I didn't bother. So yeah, it was just money that I made on the day rate for this little job. Another one, locks on site visit, 650. That was ex-VAT, of course. This was on the end of a project, some additional work that came in that wasn't agreed upon in the first proposal. So there was an additional site visit for programming and handover. So that was just, I worked out my costings and yeah, did it as a total there. Again, that's ex-VAT, but that was basically just labor, additional site visit and programming and handover. This was a BMS system, so call out to diagnose a fault on, yeah, this was kind of a BMS / industrial system. So site visit to diagnose a fault with chromators 3 and 4 and to check BMS functionality. So that was very close to me. That was around the corner. So 550. And what was amazing, the client, the manager, was like blown away when I charged him 550, because he's used to paying trend engineers like 800 quid or 800 quid to £1,000 in some places. So he was very happy when I put in my invoice, or he asked me what my day rate was. And then I think I had to check something the next day for like an hour. So I just did a call out charge of 140. But again, all ex-VAT. So yeah, those are just some examples of what I've charged as a self-employed contractor business owner. And the next thing that I want to get into is like realistic timeframes of how long it actually takes to move into this industry and then to become self-employed contractors and business owners. So now I want to talk to you about realistic timeframes of how long this type of thing takes. You know, how long does it take to go from just a standard, let's say, domestic electrician to, firstly, let's say, get into the industry as a BMS service engineer? Now, we've worked with people, and the record at the moment is 7 weeks. So from basically getting up to speed with all the technical understanding, so like those things that I mentioned, electrical controls, and then project delivery, so control panel and then design, and then working with that person, so their CV's in order, their LinkedIn's in order, they're communicating in the right way, they're speaking the lingo, you know, they're on the same level as the recruiters, as the hiring managers, as the business owners within the BMS industry. This particular person, Mo, it took him 7 weeks. So Mo was an absolute machine, but it just shows you really, like, with the right, and I'm going to blow our trumpets here if you don't mind, with the right training, with the right coaching, it's as quick as that. It's ultimately on you. Other people, it's taken maybe 12 weeks. Other people, it's, you know, maybe 16 weeks, but it's totally doable. And it really comes down to the person, providing you've got the right information and guidance. So I would say 8 to 12 weeks to actually make that shift and get into the industry and know your stuff, know the right technical things and able to communicate them, and obviously get your CV and LinkedIn dialed in, get all of that in order. But then the next phase is, well, now I'm in the industry. I'm in the industry of controls, automation, BMS. And ultimately, once you're in the industry, once you're doing controls in one of these many sectors that I talked about at the start, it's all the same thing now. It all comes boils back down to electrical controls. Now it's like, well, I can go anywhere really. I can go anywhere within that industry, providing you've got that technical understanding and you're actually like a decent person and you actually turn up and do the work work and provide value to the business owners. The next logical progression from there is, how do I become a self-employed contractor? So I get into like the time frame that it took me in a second, but like how I would be thinking about this now is, I've just landed in the industry, okay? I would give myself a year of just being an absolute sponge within that industry, within that sector, learning as much as I possibly could, networking with many people as possible, providing huge amounts of value to the business that I work for, to other people, just really, really absorbing everything, getting to know everything there is to know about that industry, about that sector, about controls, about automation. Just go all in for a year and try and progress. If you can progress within that year, brilliant. Like if you can move up to the next stage of becoming a commissioning engineer, great. If those opportunities aren't presenting themselves, which, let's be honest, a lot of the time they don't, a lot of, unfortunately, businesses, managers, they just want you to stay in your lane and stay there and don't deviate, don't be ambitious, because it's a headache for them and then it's extra work for them, and it's not right, but it is the way it is. So if you're not able to progress within that year, then do other stuff off your own back. Maybe go on some programming, learn some systems, learn how to program some systems. And then once you've been doing that for a year and you really do know your shit and you've actually been in the industry, you've got hands-on within the industry, then this is where that confidence level is at that level now where I would be considering going self-employed. Maybe it won't be for another 6 months, but this is where I'm starting to think, well, now I've got what I need, I've got the understanding, I've got the expertise, I've got the experience, this is a key thing, and I'm saying this as a business owner, but you've been learning on that business owner's time, You're not, there's less risk on you. Like if you just dive straight into being a self-employed contractor in the BMS industry, well, firstly, you're not going to know the industry. You're not going to know the people. You're not going to know how it works. It's going to be a real struggle. So a lot of risk on you, and it's going to take you longer ultimately to get off the ground. So that's what I'm saying. Go all in for a year within this position that you're in, absorb everything. And then at this stage, after a year, then I'll be thinking about, well, who are the businesses that need help? Who are the businesses that currently have contractors? It might even be the business that you're working for. Like they use contractors, because what I've noticed, what I've seen in certainly the BMS industry, is they might, like this particular business might have an employee. This employee might be really good, might know their self-worth, might want to go self-employed, and they do. They just leave, and then this business, because they're short of a person, this person's really, really good, and they would be relying on that person, they just end up contracting that person back in to work with them on like 2, 3, 4 times the money, So that's a possibility. But the more valuable you are, the more you build yourself up within that year, the easier it is for you to go self-employed contractor at the end of that year. So that's kind of what I've been doing after that year. It's just trying to get small projects, day rate work, maybe knowing people that you can help out with, and go and just build up slowly doing that kind of thing. It's really important as well that you've actually put away some savings. So maybe after that year, you're ready. And then over the next 6 months, you're putting away savings and you're sort of thinking about how you're going to make this move. So then when you do go and pull the trigger, go self-employed contractor, you've got some security. You don't want to be going into business from a place of fear and desperation and not being able to pay your bills and your family, if your family's relying on you. And it might be that you can organize and negotiate going from like 5-day a week to 3-day a week, and that's what I did. So you might be able to negotiate with your current employer just to make it a little bit less risky and a little bit easier for you. And then really from there, now you're a self-employed contractor, you're let's say you're getting maybe 6-month contracts, maybe to start with, the least risky thing to do is to go and try and find yourself a 6-month contract, a 12-month contract. Do that, get some more money, get some capital into the business. Like you're going to be getting paid very well on a 6-month, 12-month contract. So put some of that stuff away. And in that time, then you're thinking about your own business. You're starting to think about going into business, all on your own, maybe starting to build a team, maybe, starting to think about sales, marketing, that kind of thing. And then obviously it just develops from there. That's where you start going down, you know, the business owner, building a team kind of route. Or maybe you stay as a self-employed contractor, you know, it's less risky, easier to manage, less responsibility. So that's kind of where I would go with that. Now, I'm just going to dive into the computer and share my LinkedIn and just give you a little taste of like the time frame that it took me, not knowing obviously what I know now, not having anyone to show me, not having a mentor, just basically working it out on my own. So let's dive in and have a look now. So diving into my LinkedIn, and you can find me if you want to have a look, just search Chris Guyatt. So I was an apprentice, then I worked for a startup, then I was a service engineer for most of my career. Then I joined Loxon UK, so smart home automation, building automation business. And then I finished with them February 2020, right in time for COVID. So that was good timing. And then from February to, so yeah, I went self-employed, set up on my own then, February 2020. And then February, March, April, May, June, July. So 5 or 6 months, I was self-employed contractor, trying to work if I could, obviously with all the restrictions and whatnot, until July 2020 for about six months. Had a wedding to pay for as well, so I needed to get some regular income in. So then, but I still had like a little side business. I actually went into business around this time, actually, when I was still at Bowers Group. I had a little side hustle, Amazon FBA business, but that's not really within context of this video. But yeah, so then I was still like a self-employed sole trader, doing like little side jobs, side Loxon jobs throughout my time with R&B Industrial. Then towards the end, I think the last 2-3 months with R&B Industrial as an electrical controls engineer, I then negotiated to go, I think it was a 4-day working week, and then I went 3-day working week, and then obviously on those days and a Saturday I would do my own stuff, my own contracting work, side projects, etc. And then at the end of that time, so October 2021, I then did a 12-month contract as a BMS engineer. So it's not in here because it was under my business. I set up a limited business, and yeah, did that for a year. And then around November 2022, then I kind of had some of the things that I was talking about earlier. I had enough confidence, had enough resources. Actually, I was planning to go back to this company, but I ended up going all into training, coaching, that kind of thing, and building out a program. So yeah, but then since that's been like, I've done like my own side projects or my own projects with the automation as a self-employed contractor. Now as a business owner, there's a team of us. So yeah, that's kind of how the progression went for me. Yeah, so you can see like I started my own business in March 2020, just when I finished with Loxon. So that was like 4 years, 9 months ago. But really, I've only done it like as a self-employed contractor without being under full-time employment for whatever that works out at, let's say about three years, and then going on to be a business owner. So yeah, that's what the time frame looks like. Now that overview that I gave you earlier on in this video about the habitable zones, uninhabitable zones, like a big picture overview of the industry and all the sectors, I encourage you to watch that video. It's here or somewhere within this page. So if you want to get a good understanding of basically, let me read what the video title is called, a complete guide to controls, automation and BMS, then yeah, I encourage you to watch this video.